Hello, Whitekapa, and welcome to Coming Home, a limited sacred conversation series for the children of the past, the present, and the future. These conversations are hosted and facilitated by Charlene Sanjenko, founder of reGEN Media, and feature the wisdom of Wayne Christian, whose Indian name passed down to him, reGEN, means big voice that speaks the truth. We invite you to join us for conversations of hope, revival, and of the ancestors we intend to be for those yet unborn. This episode of Coming Home includes a deeply personal story told by reGEN about the loss of a family member and taking one's own life. We understand this content may be troubling or upsetting for some listeners. When the segment is coming, you'll hear a warning from Chief Wayne, and this sound will play. If you'd like to skip the segment, move ahead to timestamp 2747, where a similar chime will play to let you know the segment is over.
So you think about healing and we think about, the notion of what you call empowerment. And a lot of it really is, what is power? Like, what does that really mean? It's one of our Sukhotham laws, actually. It's the sixth law that's talked about, and sacred laws are given to us by the Talkukri, the creator, power. And in the context of the Western society, it's all about money and gaining sort of strength and all of those things, right? Economic power, those kinds of processes. For us, I think when we talk about power, it's really about individual and how do you connect to yourself and everything around you. Our powerful people were ones that could connect to the animals, could connect to the water, could connect to the plants and with each other. But where does that come from, that power? It comes from within. It doesn't come from the outside. The Western society has this notion of power, and it's usually somebody gives you power by electing you, by giving you money, all of those kinds of things is what somebody else giving you something, and you gain this power. So when we talk about power and empowerment, it really is about self. And how do we contain within ourselves to develop our own sort of being, who we are as an individual. In the healing process, our biggest enemy is ourself. We go up against ourself all the time. I've talked through the podcasts about our self-talk. I've talked about how people look at themselves and get into that whole process of really, before they even step a foot forward, they're talking themselves in a negative to themselves in a negative way in their mind, in their self-talk. And where does that come from? Why does that happen? A lot of things that happen to us when we're children. And we're given this sort of impression of the world that everything we do as children is wrong. You do this, you get hell for it. You do that, and you get chastised or disciplined, or you're told you're this or you're told you're that. All the outside messages telling that little child about what they are, who they are, but that's not who they are. So those messages resonates with them, and as they grow older, they carry it with them as adults. So how do people get their personal power back? How do they do that? I think that's what's important. Part of this process has been about building a cognitive life raft, that whole process of healing and letting go. But the real critical piece, we talk about it in terms of healing and ceremony and safety. But really what it is in order for people to move forward, they have to let go. A lot of us pack with us our entire lives, all the garbage and all the name calling and all the negativity. We carry that with us. And, we get weighed down by it. And we have to learn how to let it go. And we have to literally breathe life back into ourselves. People need to take deep breaths and remember that air is life. Give yourself air, walking, deep breaths, ceremony. It's just those kinds of things. It sounds simplistic, but people need to give themselves life again and create that inner power within themselves and understand that whatever has happened to them as children is not their fault, because my experience in growing up and the things that I did and happened, I blamed myself for things, but I was a child when these things happened. I had no control over it. You know, I was 12 years old and my family was all removed from my mom. And I blamed myself because I was the oldest male, that I should have done something. I should have stopped them from being broke apart. But I was just a child. But that I carried that with me, you know, till I got older and understood that, hey, I was a child at that time. I was powerless over it, you know. So I think that's when we talk about taking this ability to regain that power within ourselves, or empower, however you want. You know, you have to really think about letting go. There's lots of ways to let go. You know, the biggest things that people recognize when you're letting go of things is tears and uh, anger, letting stuff out, because people bottle this stuff up, and they do this really deep work. A lot of people literally want to vomit and let it out. And it's like an expelling of sort of that, what's holding people back inside, and letting that go. And so a lot of people need to get more air inside themselves, you know, breathing, deep breathing. Hollering is a good one. Going to the mountains or going to the water, just let it go. And just let it, whatever that pain is, whatever you're holding inside of yourself, let it go. It's not yours. You know, I think that that's what people have to understand when we talk about that personal power. How we gain that personal power is by giving ourselves life through air, through breath. And I think that's what's really important in terms of what we do. And we move away from that whole notion of somebody else having control over us to us taking control of our own selves. You know, because it's interesting, you know, breathing is automatic. If, you know, and I think that if we didn't have that ability to automatically breathe, I think a lot of people would just faint because they would stop breathing. You know, and I think they forget that air and breath is life. Breathe life into yourself. You know, we're taught that there's four elements that make up what we consider the world, or the people call it the climate, right? But you've got fire, you've got water, you've got air, and you've got earth. Those four elements make up the makeup, if you will, of everything that is on this earth. And those elements would be considered climate, right? If you really think about it, you can take away fire, you can take away water for a period of time, and the earth you can take away. But if you take away air within X number of minutes, you wouldn't live. If we took air, oxygen, you know, and I think that's the big battle we're having, oxygen with the carbon monoxide and the lack of green trees to process it into oxygen. We have to think about that. That's what gives us life. So I think when we talk about empowerment, it's about how do you give yourself life again through breath. And you can do many different ways. People run, people, you know, walk, people do deep breathing exercises. People go to the mountains and holler and scream their lungs out, but it's letting it go. Whatever is holding you back inside, and whatever you're carrying as a child, you've carried into the adult world, you get pretty tired. It's time to let it go. You know, I think people need to learn to let things go. And that doesn't mean what didn't exist, because it's that understanding that, yeah, you acknowledge it exists, but you're letting it go. It doesn't control you anymore. And I think that's the important lesson in this whole place. You can't gain personal power if you don't let go of things. And just recognize that every one of us sort of walk this earth in that way. So
it's interesting, and I love the tangible examples that you're sharing, because I don't think, you know, as young people, we're not taught to have a practice of releasing things. And you know, I'm so grateful as a young person that I got into sports, and I love to be active. And even now, you know, I still like fitness and I still work out, but honestly, if I don't, I just feel all seized up inside. Like I feel seized up emotionally. I feel seized up in this 50-year-old body, like physically. And I think, why do we not? Maybe we are now, but why don't we spend more time with kids and young people and just help them to understand that if we don't have a regular practice of releasing, of sweating, of running, of that, it does just stay bottled up. And I think it's so valuable that you've offered these really practical ways that people, dance in your kitchen, like, just whatever it is for you, is just so powerful. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, the other thing with it is, understanding our way of being and who we are and our way of life. Go to the land, go to the water, walk on the land, pick berries. This really that whole connection, because what that does is starts to open things up and you can let things go. Because I think that's the things we have in order for us to grow is inside ourselves and the power of ourselves. We have to let all that crap go, because otherwise it just bottles us up. We can't move anywhere. And so it's really important we think in the context of physical movement. And for children, it's about playing, playing tag and doing this and doing that and running all over the place and hollering and screaming. And I know adults get upset, but that's children being children. Allow them to be children and to experience that. And then I think as they get older, they move into a whole different process. They begin to be told, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, shut up and sit down. And that's not right. We have to, yes, teach them respectful boundaries, but they have to be able to have movement and sound, because that's will continue their growth as an individual. And they won't bottle that stuff up. They won't be taught to keep it down. They can let it go. And I think that's an important part of the process. It's really about taking the ability to take your own personal power and whatever that may look like, and let go of those things that are holding you back. And that's healing. It's just a process, and there's no quick fix. It's not an easy thing to do sometimes, because some people are so caught up in their identity. I'm this, I'm that. And they get so caught up in it, they can't see anything other than that, because they haven't allowed themselves to grow and allow those things to be let go, especially if they blame themselves for things, because then there's a tremendous amount of guilt and shame with that. That's not theirs. They've got to let it go, and they've got to learn how to critically and help themselves. Because if they can help themselves, they'll move out of that process. And we forget how powerful we are as an individual and the things that we can do for ourselves. We are always looking at ourselves as, well, somebody's got to do it for me. No, you don't. You've got to do it yourself. But you have to learn some tools to do that. And maybe you need some mentoring, maybe you need some coaching, maybe you need somebody to check in with every once in a while. Maybe you need to go to the mountains, maybe you need to go to the water, whatever. But there's always that process. Yes, you're doing it is for yourself, you help yourself, but when you're doing it, you're not alone. I think that's what people forget. They think, well, I got to do this all myself. Well, that's true, but you need to build that support system for yourself. Part of that cognitive life raft, you build that mental understanding, and you build the support to get that raft where you need to go. Otherwise, you'll just sit in one place. Yes, you can be above water, you just be floating. You're really not going anywhere, because you're not actually helping yourself. You're not having people help you, because I think that's a big part of it. So our relationships with others is important, and that's the biggest downfall we have as people, is we don't we have a hard time asking for help, because we've been taught, well, do something about it. And yeah, that's partially true. Help yourself, but when you help yourself, you need to bring in other resources, because you don't know what you don't know, and I think that's what's important part of the process.
What advice guidance or advice might you have around that? Like, you're right. Sometimes it's really tricky to ask for help. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I think sometimes it's trickier for for males than it might be for females, not always, but not that it's a gender thing at all, but I think that sometimes it's a little bit hard to you're really struggling. And I know that, a lot of the help that we ask for isn't help from the physical plane, but I'm wondering if you have any guidance if someone's really struggling with that, I'm all alone, and that's the story that's in their head right now. Where do you even start to take that step about building some support around yourself?
Yeah, it's difficult in the environment we live in, despite us having all these access to information and tools like Facebook, Twitter, Tinder, all of those things, right? It's all about, sort of if you will, sort of a technical sort of connection. It's just there. You can be busy all day long, just, texting and emailing and all of that stuff, right? Facebook, Messenger and all of that. In spite of that, people will engage those levels, but they don't truly get to experience the human contact, if you will, that energy, that sense of belonging, that sense of connection with as a face-to-face, like sitting down or having a coffee, as an example, sitting around a campfire, going out for a hike together, going seeing a movie, just that connection. So I think the first part is recognize, yeah, technology is great, but they need human contact in order to move forward. Because what I see happening, there's a lot of young people, and I mean young in the sense of 40 and under, that have a very difficult time asking for help. There's so much pressure on them to do many different things. And I think that's why the addictions and the opioid crisis and all that is skyrocketing, because they're alone. They feel alone. A lot of the overdoses that are happening aren't happening on the streets, downtown big centers. They're happening in homes now. And a lot of them are male. And I think that's the whole thing, asking for help, that connection. So how do they do that? Because sometimes they've never, ever been taught that, to ask for help. I think that's the thing, is that when sometimes they reach out for help, then they get their hands slapped, kind of, so to speak. And what's the matter with you? You're not strong enough. What the heck's wrong with you? All of that kind of thing. Again, the negativity that surrounds us. And I don't know why people do that to other human beings. When people are reaching out, because lots of times when people are reaching out, they really just need to make that human connection and literally have a conversation, having somebody in the room with them, having that physical presence comforts people, that feels them that they're not alone. And I think that's an important part. That's why I think these support groups that happen are really critical. There's evolving men's wellness support groups, as an example, women's wellness support groups. And people just need to reach out and connect with each other in that kind of a process. But it's not an easy process for people to ask for help, because we've been conditioned, not only men, but also women, that, hey, look after it. Heck's wrong with you? That whole, all those messages, right? And people have a hard time being vulnerable, because when people become vulnerable, then they come under attack. And that's really difficult for people to show their vulnerability without feeling that somebody's going to judge them for it. And I think that's the issue. And we have to learn how to, sort of speak our truth without blame or judgment. And I think that's a hard thing to do. You speak your truth without blame or judgment, because people are quick to victimize themselves and blame others. It's your fault, your fault, your fault. And then it becomes that kind of a process when they talk. And I think that we spend a lot of time talking, but we don't say a hell of a lot. And I think that's it's got to be meaningful conversation with somebody that'll listen to you.
Yeah.
And that's what I've learned over the years, is that we have to really begin to listen more and talk less. And I think that's what's important, especially with children. Listen more and talk less, because children, if you listen to children and where they're doing and what they're doing, they're very honest about things, and listen to it. And what does that mean for them? How can you support them? What can you do? And I think that's what's important, so they feel valued as human beings, not as objects, you know. And I think that's what's important in the process. And I think that to make that connection, it's that humanness. Have to develop processes for yourself that you have human contact, and not in a negative way. You can go out and see a show, a movie. You can watch a hockey game. You know, you just go, all kinds of stuff is out there. Just stay off the goddamn internet.
Well, and
internet is there's interaction there, but it's not a human interaction. It's one dimensional.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
it's just sad, actually.
I think too, like, you know, I know folks have, even if they don't feel ready or strong enough to maybe ask for help, like you said, to just put yourself in an environment where there's the presence of other people. So, you know, just being in a coffee shop, even if you're on your own, being in a coffee shop, or, you know, being in a fitness gym and just walking on a treadmill, or, you know, maybe going somewhere and volunteering feeling like you're part of something, even if you don't feel strong enough to start to like talk to other people and speak to other people, but you're at least in the vicinity of other humans, rather than just, you know, being alone, I think is a important first step.
For sure.
You mentioned something a bit earlier, and I wanted to dig into it just a little bit further, because I think it's a really valuable teaching. And you said when we're working through something, you know, whether that's, you know, that process of letting go, you mentioned that an important part of that is to remember that this pain is not ours. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about that, because in the moment, it feels like it is, and I wondered how you could help frame it to understand that it is something that we can let go. It's not who we are. It's not ours. And it's important to let it kind of pass through us.
Just an advisory. I'm going to talk about a situation, a very traumatic situation, and people may get triggered by this.
Thank you.
Because this is real life experience. So I think it's really, because it's things that I've walked through. Because like I said, I won't take people to a place if I haven't been through it myself. So a long time ago, I know it's funny I say that, a long time, because it was 20, I think I was 23 years old, 24 years old. I took in my brother, one of my younger brothers, into my care. I was the foster parent. And being responsible and being the eldest male, I thought that was a thing to do. The issue that happened and evolved is I didn't understand that he was struggling with mental health issues, really severe mental health issues, that he should have actually been institutionalized to stabilize it. I think it was chemical imbalances, because he would literally walk until it was just crazy, actually. I had a very difficult time. I was young. I didn't know who to turn to in our community. There was no resources whatsoever. And eventually what happened is that it was so painful for him that he actually took my rifle and shot himself. You know, took his life, committed suicide. One of the most horrific days in my life, December 10th, 1977. It's etched into my mind. You know, I went into a whole process, and again, it's about you know, a reaction. My reaction was one of numbness. I just numbed myself out for a whole week as we were preparing for burial and all of those things. I was just numbed right out. And honestly, that pain and that anguish lasted for a long time. I didn't get rid of it overnight, because I was young at the time, and I didn't know what to do with it, right? And a big piece of it was, as I began to understand that it wasn't my fault, no matter what I would have done, no matter what I could have done, if we didn't get him to a safe place, he was going to, do what he was going to do. And unfortunately, I couldn't provide him safety, and because I didn't. This is the hard part, not knowing. And I think that was the biggest piece. So it took me approximately 15 years before I could actually articulate and talk about this without totally breaking down, because it's a trauma. And as soon as I talk about it, a day just comes back like a picture, very vivid. I can see it now, just the way the day was, the snow and what it was and what happened, and the ground, all of that stuff, right? It's kind of just very vivid. It's like a movie, right? And so how then do I take that pain and that memory and let go of it? And a big piece of it was coming to that part of myself. First of all, it was not my fault. Yes, I could have prevented some things, but eventually, if he was going to be committed to this, he was going to do it. And that's what I've learned. But also the other thing, I began to talk about it and say that this is what happened. This is what happened to my brother, and this is how it took me, without breaking down, I could speak about it and let it go, and let it go, and let it go, and let it go. Every time I talked about it, I let go. First time I talked about it, I was really tearful and very anxious and very emotional. And as I talked more about it over the years, because there was a true indication of how do you put it, the trauma that our people experience. And like I said, and I walk in the pain of our people. I understand this stuff because I've walked into a lot of pain, different personal pain. So that's that letting go piece of it. And how do you do that is really important to understand. It took me a long time to have to build that, what's talked about, that cognitive life raft, that mental understanding of what was going on. I didn't know. So I had to bring information in as I grew up, so to speak, and learn different things that I learned that, okay, this is not my fault. And there's nothing that I could have done. I could have done some things differently, but it was not going to change the outcome because he was committed to taking his life. So I think that when I talk about triggers for people, it's hard to talk about this stuff. But if you don't talk it out, you act it out. That's what a good friend of mine said in the work we do. If you don't talk this stuff out, you act it out. And you have to find a safe way to let it go and to articulate it and to let it go. Because it is in that act of talking, like as I'm speaking to you, I'm breathing in, but I'm breathing out. In, out. I'm letting stuff go. So that's kind of when you talk about these issues and trauma and pain, it's each one of us is different in how we sort of manifest the pain, but also how we deal with the pain. And I think that but it's that acknowledgement that you need to deal with it. Because if I would have allowed that to run my life, I wouldn't be where I'm standing today. I would have not be here. I would not be here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important. So I think that that's in the context when you talk about this. It's sharing that is like I said, it's a painful thing, and that pain, and you literally have to learn how to walk through it.
Mm-hmm.
You walk through the pain, but you walk through it, as I learned, with support. Because I didn't I did this stuff, but I did it with other kinds of support. I had psychologists that worked with me.
Mm-hmm.
I had healers that worked with me, as I was working through all of this. It just, I did the work. Like I said earlier, you do the work, but you need support. And so you bring in other types of support. And so that's how I did it. And I think that that's what we fail to do sometimes. We think we can do it on our own without recognizing you need that kind of emotional support to help you through it, that spiritual support to help you through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think to help you clear it and move on, so you can clear that path for yourself. And that's literally helping yourself, but you do it with support and help. So that's how we talk about that. And that's why I give a trigger warning at the very beginning. It's people will be triggered by this. And if you are, find somebody you can talk to about it. Talk it out before you act it out. Just let it go. Start letting it go, piece at a time. Sometimes we can't let it go all at once. It took, like I said, it took me about 15 years literally to really to the point of where I could actually let it go. And it was interesting because I've been involved in the healing and helping people for a long time. And I think what happened for me is I got so busy helping others, I forgot to help myself at that point. And I think that had a real impact on my, it was starting to affect my health, my mental well-being, and those types of things. So I had to do something about it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that story and that life experience. And it just again reminds me how important this work is, and also how grateful I am to be doing it with you. It's interesting that, you know, we can make sense about, you know, if we're, you know, building a house, let's say, you know, we can make sense that, you know, we have to have a bit of a plan, and there's certain things that we can do ourselves, but then we have to ask other people for help because we don't know how to do certain aspects of building the house. You know, we have to bring different tradespeople in, and sometimes we can do our own labor, and we're always around. But, you know, when it comes to our healing, it's important that we kind of think about it in the same way as like there is work to be done. It's important to have a bit of a plan. There's, you know, there's something that you do have to commit to, and there's so much of it that really does require, like you said, it requires other folks that can help us, that might have different gifts and understanding that we just don't. I know, you know, I know in my own journey, just being able to spend time with you and talk with you and understand things maybe a little differently than I have in the past has been huge. And, you know, this is coming from you know, an adult woman that has done many of the other different things, right? And so I just want to encourage folks that healing is a journey, and it you know, we have to maybe think about something that, you know, we can take a different example or a different analogy and pull it over, because there is work that we have to do, and it comes from different people and different tools and different experiences, and we just kind of keep working on it, just keep doing the work.
Yeah, it's really, people need to understand that as human beings, we learn to remember we have to learn to be human and to live. You know, that's that whole process. Living is a process of ups and downs, you know, stresses. It's an ongoing process. It doesn't end. It ends when you're buried 6 feet under. That's when life ends. So in your journey, and you walk this path, is how do you want your journey to be? Well, how do you want your life to be? If you want it to be in a continuous state of you know, being a victim, or you want to change your life, you have the power to do that. People have that power within, but you have to let stuff go so they can build that personal power. They can build that inner strength, that inner guidance, all of those things. And it's in our blood because, like I said, we're here. Our people have been here for thousands of years. And you think about our genetics, the ability where we have to move beyond survival. We have to start living again and back to our way of life and supporting each other, supporting ourselves, our families, all of those things that were taken away and destroyed by the colonial genocidal system. We have the ability to change all that. And it can happen in an instance by changing your thoughts. First of all, you're no longer a victim of the system. You're taking control of your life and doing something about it. And I think that a big piece of that is learning to let go of, you know, that negativity, that anguish, that anger, that rage. That's the hardest part people have, to let go of anger and rage. They do. It's just really hard to, because people get triggered into it automatically. Just boom. And they're into it. Either they're fighting it, they're freezing, or they're running. You know? So let's find a way to let that go, because it's not who you are. It's who you've become because of what's happened. And I think that's understand that, and, you know, change your life so you can change the world.
Thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us today about regaining our power and just remembering that feeling powerful is our natural state. It is how we were born, and it is the place that we, were invited to return to, and it's a journey to get there. So thank you so much for today's conversation.
Thank you for joining us for Coming Home. This episode was brought to you by reGEN Media, the first and only Indigenous-owned and female-led wraparound ecosystem that facilitates the creation, funding, and distribution of regenerative media projects through a relational filmmaking model. Together, we aspire to turn the page from the last darker chapter of our history to the next, more hopeful and empowering chapter. Visit us again next time for more shared wisdom, knowledge, and another conversation. For more information about Coming Home, reGEN Media, Winnick Sheen, and more, visit regenimpactmedia.com. Until next time, puru and goodbye.